Ushim nezlamnym putushnogoran.
Good morning, good morning.
So, today we'll talk about the catastrophe that awaits Ukraine and Ukrainians this winter because of the war and because it turns out they weren't prepared. They prepared for the coming winter in big cities and smaller ones alike. We'll also discuss the challenging situation with the armed forces of Ukraine's command, where preparations are also lacking. And a few other topics that are still interesting. Subscribe so you don't miss any of it. Before we begin, I want to show you how those who are close to Kvartal 95 are living now. And one of our characters, or rather anti-heroes, he's more of an antagonist than a protagonist in our funny story. This is Kashevoy, who used to clown around on stage and then started defending everyone there, including Zelensky. And now, suddenly he sits and talks about how bored he is in Turkey.
Subtitled by Dimatorza. How are you?
Hello.
It's boring in the rainy Turkish way.
A brief digression.
And also in pure Ukrainian, it's pretty strange. And now let's see how ordinary Ukrainians live who also want to go to Turkey so that it rains and they also get bored. For example, there's this video, and this is especially interesting. They're telling us about a German shepherd heroically guarding the borders of Ukraine together with its owner, and it's very hard to leave. Here, this very journalist talks a lot about these two racers, so to speak, and let's see what they're like.
The violators started fighting in difficult conditions, in the forest, snow, bias. The next violators, for example, here are our heroes in the border process. In the next 2007, this hero who left for Turkey.
You know who was bored?
Draft Dodgers, a hero who left for Turkey to live somewhere else, not where. At any moment, if someone wants, they can be taken by the hand, put into the so-called resilience van, given an electronic turkey so they can also get a legendary point and be sent off. To storm the tree lines, as they say, and in the form of an economist's assault trooper, sniper assault trooper, clerk assault trooper, cook assault trooper, and in general a wide range of all professions related to storming the tree lines.
The completion of the case of the German shepherd Stella. She talks about the border with a smile.
Border guard Victor, who himself does not serve, tells this with a smile. And of course, he doesn't guard the eastern border of Ukraine because they could kill you there, but the western border of Ukraine is what he guards. From whom it's absolutely impossible to understand. I mean, are Romanians or Poles or Belarusians going to break into Ukraine, into Mother Ukraine, for what? For what reason? To organize sabotage, to restore those Shukovich monuments, or what? Very strange.
They have been working for more than 2 years already, and during that time, they have detained more than 24 violators.
The dog was on a leash, but even on the leash, it was pulling forward and didn't respond to anything.
The border guard's face is the most cheerful and so kind, really kind, the command comes immediately.
After the interview, Victor and Stella took another assignment and detained 3 more violators that day.
The same day, 3 more? Right on the day of the interview, together with his dog, this cheerful border guard prevented 3 people from illegally crossing the border of Ukraine. That is the sacred strip that must never be crossed. For those who are not connected with these Kashevis and other leaders, those who don't have such villas. Well, in general, you can see what's what. A person gets bored abroad, it's boring, it's raining, so what can you do? But others aren't bored, they get detained by people with dogs. And, everything would be fine. The video would have looked completely normal 10 years ago, 6 years ago. That is, the border guard is just doing his job. In the past, a lot of people were involved in smuggling there, and even now they still are, but now it's on an industrial scale. 1 dog and 1 border guard aren't enough anymore. So back then, everything would have looked fine. Well, I mean, they guard, and back then no one was really threatened by anything except maybe the criminal code, but now the threat is real and very serious. But besides the border, and the cheerful dogs with the cheerful border guards, we're also being told that winter will be really tough because supposedly the utility workers didn't prepare in time. What I'm talking about is probably something I mention every year ever since this segment started. For them, it's just a sudden revelation that in winter planes fly and will be bombed. According to Zelensky himself, in winter it's cold and infrastructure, energy, heat, and many other things are often shut down, including pumping stations which, first of all, don't work without electricity, and secondly, the sewage system can simply freeze along with the water in the pipelines. And last winter, all of this caused pipes to burst. I mean, it was unexpected for utility workers as well. I don't know how things are in the summer. By the way, let me know if everything has been fixed now, or maybe it's still standing and leaking. I don't really understand, but tell me, what's the situation like now in Kyiv and other cities? Well, one of the very powerful people, you could say, someone who rose from the very bottom to the very top through social mobility, is Taras Chmut. A wonderful last name that really characterizes this good person. He himself doesn't serve, of course, he's exempt, manages the money likes to be counted, and then it goes somewhere, maybe for another, maybe a satellite, maybe for some vans. Once I saw that Prytula seemed to have collected some money, and then they spent it on some vans they planned to use at the front, but then they ended up with the draft office guys. So that's how it is. And this person's foundation is called Come Back Alive. And in a new interview, he spoke openly about Ukraine's preparations for winter and noted that we still, well, that is, he probably can't counter Russian ballistic missiles together with Zelensky, and that's why the situation remains quite uncertain. At the same time, again, they, not us, continue to heat up the situation, continue to escalate it, continue to send planes, well, drones that will bomb. And in response, it's not them, but actually the citizens of Ukraine who face the retaliation. What will happen in winter because of these retaliations? Well, I think we can all imagine. Chmut says, maybe every year we say that this winter will be the worst, and maybe this one will turn out to be the worst again. Everything could have collapsed with just one strike, one missile, one hit. Honestly, this is kind of a hard to translate set of words. I don't really understand what it's about. But Chmut remembered, can you imagine how he himself was left without electricity, water and heat, just like his team. But now, in his opinion, the situation has gotten worse. Well, maybe the electricity was cut off in Chmut's wine cellar and the wine got a little cold, I can believe that. Or maybe the jacuzzi stopped heating up to the right temperature. But for ordinary people, the situation is a little different. What's even worse, says Chmut, is that with the Ministry of Defense system being rebooted amid this conflict with the armed forces, which, by the way, we're about to discuss with you, with the focus being not on the war but on politics, we won't be able to prepare properly. I mean, can you imagine, right? There's always something getting in the way. Mustafa Nayem, the same one who organized the Maidan with students, tea, good spirits, and who was later appointed after the war as the guardian of energy facilities in Ukraine. Well, we all see that. Yes, he preserved all that while his brothers spent $180,000 on a Mercedes. Ah, so these characters are apparently responsible for this preparation. Maybe, maybe not. But it turns out that actually those who discuss war, not politics, or rather politics, not war, those are the ones who are to blame. Probably this is just an ordinary person who doesn't like Syrskyi or in general Fedorov or any of those who currently hold high positions. And by the way, looking ahead, maybe you don't notice it right now, but more and more responsible positions are going to the military, the Minister of Defense, for example, who is being advocated as a military man, while according to the Constitution, he is supposed to be a civilian. By the way, that's extremely interesting, and all the other responsible officials will also come from the military. Well, for now, the Minister of Economy doesn't seem to be in the military, but I think they'll fix that soon. So Chmut says the following as a result. I think everyone should already in July start thinking about where they will be in the winter. That is, he doesn't advise utility workers and those who are not ordinary employees, I mean not the regular workers obviously, but the managers and those responsible for budgets, for purchasing various infrastructure modules to repair those very energy facilities, pumping stations and so on. Not the minister, the one in charge of the money allocated for all this. He advises people who can leave to think about going somewhere because what will happen in the winter will be a quiet nightmare. He says maybe it's time for someone to think about moving to a village or to a district center or maybe even abroad. But again, we see that character with the broad, complex face, Kashevoy, who is bored. In Turkey, he's bored, it's raining. But other people liable for military service, who are the majority in Ukraine, men and now women, simply can't leave the country. Well, simply because the border is closed. Closed by whom? Well, we've seen it guarded by wonderful dogs in various shapes and uniforms. There are factors involved. I won't go into detail, but the border is closed with really secure locks, and the border is basically under lock and key. Chmut says the winter will be very tough. He also shares that if there are no political agreements, restrictions, or some kind of incidents, things will go badly. It seems that the Russians will launch strikes with ballistic missiles. Chmut shares his insights. How much of a great analyst do you have to be to assume that ballistic missiles will be flying into Ukraine? Can you imagine? That's probably been happening since the first day of the war, right? A genius just like Merz, who again is getting ahead of himself, who today stated that suddenly the lack of cheap energy resources from Russia has led to a sharp decline and continues to cause a further decline in the German economy. Imagine what a surprise. A surprise who could have thought, except maybe the Ukrainians, it's just terrible. Well, these geniuses were probably raised somewhere in some kind of incubators where there are no developmental toys. Next, he says the following. I don't have any predictions, but a lot depends on the situation with the armed forces and the ministries of defense. Because, well, it's definitely not going to be better than at the front. The question is, well, what next? So basically, like Klitschko said, should we be getting ready for winter? And in his opinion, they need to start a systematic transformation. In the 7th year of the war, we've come to the conclusion that we need to start a systematic transformation, but that has never happened before. And here we go again. Can you imagine what a surprise? We need something systematic. Before they weren't needed, but now the necessity has arisen. The elections were cancelled because there will be a difficult situation in the winter and there won't be any systematic change. No. Everything is fine with the constitution, which basically doesn't even exist anymore and which will soon be rewritten for the new Minister of Defense. Mark my words. Well, and everything else requires systematic changes, apparently again. Mobilization and everything else, which also requires more systematic changes. Apparently, judging by what they say about Ukrainian society's attitude toward the war, you have to discuss the war, not politics. It feels like it's being talked about constantly. But nevertheless, they really are starting to discuss the war together with politics. In Kyiv, this protest has been going on for 5 days already, not only in Kyiv but also in other cities. By the way, they've already brought in different kinds of pies here. Somewhere I saw a picture, maybe not here, but in Kyiv there are hundreds of participants, notice not thousands, with cardboard signs. They urge authorities to reconsider dismissing Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov. The very same defense minister who didn't say that we need to stop this somehow or that we need to negotiate somehow. No va. And most representatives of the civil society in Ukraine on that very Maidan are pensioners, women, those who care the most. Usually the ones shouting in the comments that the borders should be frozen along the 1991 lines, with a few exceptions. And there are also young people up to 24 who haven't been affected by mobilization yet and who are still cheerful for now. With happy, enlightened faces, they talk about how we have to fight because how else? Our country's dignity is at stake. The Buryats will come to us, can you imagine? But maybe someday they will come, maybe as tourists. But what's happening in Ukraine right now? Well, you can't mistake it for anything else. It has a certain name. Anyway, to sum up, the protesters shout shame and Ukraine is not Russia. But what does that mean here? It's impossible to see how the Minister of Defense and Syrskyi are involved. There are no holidays in war. The most interesting thing is what they're shouting, even though they're shouting it themselves right there on the Maidan, and in other cities also on Maidans. Something like that. They're not fighting, but others fight for them, and they shouldn't have any qualms about it. According to these participants, as many as 80 people gathered in Mykolaiv. Can you imagine what a huge crowd that is? They could probably take over half of Ukraine and reshape it as they see fit, they say. These heroes of our time. We will keep taking to the streets until we are heard. We want order to be established in the country. We want Fedorov to become the Minister of Defense because he is the most effective of all. There are a lot of jokes going around about bring back Fedorov or turn Fedorov around. Some people mixed up the names with Yanukovych and someone even wrote almost Fedorovich. But overall, they know what they're standing for, the mind, honor and conscience of the Ukrainian state, this so-called cardboard Maidan. A representative of the youth public organization Cult of the State. Whatever that may be, Anastasia stated that the protesters have specific demands. Nastya proudly said that these demands have been submitted to the city council, but they have not received a response yet. Overall, our Ministry of Rhetorical Questions works pretty much the same way as this very city council. Mountains of gold and rivers of milk, and you can contact it anytime, anywhere, and wait for a response. As they say, well, it's pretty much the same as how a real ministry works. There's no difference, and if there's no difference, why pay more? Let's implement our ministry, not some other ones. Nastya says we demand an immediate emergency session of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. By the way, she is currently on vacation. If you didn't know, they're on vacation right now, the deputies. Ballistic missiles are flying, it's raining in Turkey, but they're relaxing, and in a political crisis, Nastya says, going on vacation is not an option. We urge the president to nominate Mikhail Fedorov as Minister of Defense and ask Parliament to support him to sustain defense sector reforms. And now all sorts of people have come out, like those from Kozlyansk, from Kozyatyn, showing up with all their advice and everything. And now even that guy Nayem with his $180,000 Mercedes wrote that the crisis was caused by the president's decision without specifying the rate. Now it's all mixed up. Other people got worked up too. Let's put it this way. And the most interesting thing, well, I'll show you too. Did you see Kashavoy? And then there's Sternenko fighting together with his wife in some field overgrown with strange plants. And they're all very happy. Sternenko is wounded, apparently in battle. I don't know, maybe it was something with lobsters, maybe someone crushed him with a claw or something. In pricey restaurants you'll see aquariums with lobsters or spiny lobsters. Langoustines are different, but lobsters have very strong claws. And if those claws aren't tied with a rubber band, it can snap at you. Sometimes the rubber band comes off, maybe that's exactly the kind of battle wound this hero got. Well, then maybe he even deserves a medal. Let's write in the comments what kind of medal you would like to give Sternenko next. What are they telling us? Syrskyi, the commander-in-chief, will most likely be dismissed soon. He suddenly turned to Fedorov, said that he had no problems with Fedorov, and apologized if he had somehow offended him, but the time has come. And Zelensky is considering the possibility of dismissing the commander-in-chief. At the moment, the list includes as many as 11 people, which is quite a lot. Two officials told journalists that Zelensky is reviewing candidates for commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces. One of them said that most likely it will be Major General Dropatoy, the commander of the joint forces. The source also added that Syrskyi may be dismissed in the coming days. Zelensky has already met with Dropati. Well, in short, all of them are Dropati, so apparently everything will be fine. The Ministry of Defense is now headed by this very Kamara. Dropati is our commander-in-chief and Kamara is actually the Minister of Defense. Well, for now, he's just acting. That is acting, and that very Fedor was dismissed on July 18, and on the 20th, Kamara was appointed. So now this kind of specialist is in charge. He used to head the Alpha Special Operations Center of the Security Service of Ukraine. And this is the most effective elimination of the enemy at the front. They say he was also responsible for long-range operations and much, much more. Well, in other words, a professional military man is now the Minister of Defense during wartime. Maybe that's how it should be, but again, no one has changed the constitution, so that's how it is. So what? The last thing is Ukrainians are suddenly preparing once again for another attack from Belarus. It seems the same repeaters have either been removed or new ones installed. And once again, there's an excited discussion about the possibility of an attack from the territory of Belarus. They're setting up a kill zone on the border to block the enemy from the north. We're told that the Ukrainian side is building anti-tank ditches, barbed wire obstacles, and the border guards are preparing for an attack from Belarus. Well, apparently that's the very person with his dog. Most likely they're getting ready by catching Ukrainians who are trying to cross the border somewhere. So, what can I say? That's how it is. That's the situation. And now let's take a look at those very leaders, whom I think you've already missed terribly. First, let's get up to speed with the help of this character.
We are completely satisfied with our work, but unfortunately, our work did not yield any results.
Well, for several years now, yes, they've been working excellently, and apparently they're completely satisfied. Today in our issue, who do we have? First, we have Fursa, however his last name is pronounced, but he talks a lot of nonsense. And now he's saying that there is financial stability and financial growth in Ukraine. Maybe Fursa's pockets are being filled regularly, which brings him indescribable joy. But mainly, regarding other citizens, especially as this very Chmut, Fursa's partner, told us about Frint, tough times are ahead for them. Basically,
it's hanging in there. If you look out the window, things are better than we imagined.
Please look out your own window and tell us if you see the prosperity that this very Fursa is talking about. March of 22, when we were thinking about 4 or 5 years of war. We have macro-financial stability, economic growth, and struggle.
Struggle. The 5th year of the war, we have macro-financial stability and economic growth, and we are forecasting economic growth for the future as well.
These are some commentators from another reality. By the way, if you didn't know, Fursa's father is a general, so that's how it is. Everything is fine for Fursa. But we also have someone else. So, someone sent me a video with a person who has a complicated expression, clearly, but here's what he says. Where should I start? How to start the next patch, you in the beginning.
It's like this.
To join the army without drawing the orderly's attention.
You drank and you thought,
In short, they forcibly rounded you up, shoved you into a van, you're sitting, drinking coffee, and thinking about the position.
You met your future commander after assignment, got a list of roles, and explained your skills like drivers, barbers, cooks, or drone operators, just like in civilian life.
Well, barbers have finally been remembered. Now it's clear why all these people who perform have perfect haircuts, perfect beards. They don't need assault troops, they need barbers in the army, and now they're being brought into military service and they serve accordingly. But thank God now this has been sorted out.
Assault troops and scouts? Well, anyone, pretty much any role you want, basically. Came, thought, drank, came, thought.
That there's a lot of coffee again, your heart will hurt from drinking so much coffee. You looked around?
Maybe you decided after sleeping on it. All right.
I have a lot of jokes about sleeping with that thought, but I won't say them out loud.
I'll say it, and after that I came back with a more thoughtful approach.
All right, think it over, but otherwise you just come in like that, you show up at the draft office, and you end up in some unit there, and you're like, what am I doing here? I didn't come here thoughtfully, I'll go have some coffee and sleep on it for a bit. So that's how things are for us, and from one side and the other and the third, everything is just fine. Fursa says that everything is running smoothly, just as it should, so on this wonderful note, goodbye to everyone, Fedorov.
Basically, you associate this person with asymmetric actions, meaning something new that no one has done before. Let's try this. Since previous efforts produced results but lacked the right quality or quantity,